Welcome back to the county seat. Our discussion today has been with Governor Gary Herbert. We are starting a dialogue here on House Bill 148. Now, I remember back in 2004, when you were still in the governor's race before you joined the Huntsman ticket, you addressed a group of us on land access, and you talked about equal footing as being an area that should be explored and discussed. So this isn't like a 2x4 to the side of the head, do you? This is something you've contemplated for a long time, isn't it?
It is. Hopefully it'll be a 2x4 to the side of the federal government's head, you know, to get their attention and hopefully reset the dialogue, because we clearly as a state have been disadvantaged because of the public land issue. It's not all bad. I don't want to mischaracterize this. We have many beautiful, pristine areas that need preservation and protection. But more and more, the opportunity for us to develop and do things on our BLM properties has been taken away. Farming, ranching, access to water, access to our natural resources, energy development, all make it a little more difficult for us because of all the requirements, you know, the hoops we have to jump through, the Mother May I approach that we have to have with the federal government. I've been involved since the mid-90s, actually as a county commissioner. Before I was lieutenant governor, I was a county commissioner and worked with Bill Howell and Bill Redd. Bill Redd was a former county commissioner of San Juan County who kind of helped develop the idea of this equal footing, that the state of Utah did not come in on equal footing. And more importantly than that is the fact there was promises made by the federal government of disposition of properties that were then not privately owned when we became a state in 1896 that they were supposed to get rid of, dispose of it, it says. And it never happened, and consequently we have a lot more public land than virtually any other state in America other than Nevada.
Well, historically, if you read accounts from the early 1830s, states like Indiana, Illinois, they were complaining about the same thing, that the federal government had not seceded its lands after their statehood. So it's not like this is a new and novel problem, it's just a new chapter.
That's right, and we've been probably a little too willing to put up with it. Probably in our early days we should have been pushing more for disposition. Who knows why it didn't happen? I hearken back to Brigham Young and the early pioneers when they came here and bumped into Jim Bridger and he said, "I'll give you $200 if you can grow a bushel of corn." So it may not have been the most desirable area, so who wanted it? You know, the people that came here were kind of being pushed out of other parts of the country. And so we're a little too probably complacent about the federal government owning up to their responsibilities. And then in 1976, when they created the Federal Land Practice Management Act, FLPMA, which the Congress just kind of unilaterally says, well, whatever we agreed to do back when you became a state, we've decided we don't need to do it anymore. We just kind of disengage in that responsibility.
But they did promise that they would be consistent with local planning. And that was pretty clear in the bill. And have they lived up to that?
Not really. Again, sometimes they've done things without even Mother May I, by your leave, what do you think? You know, we've been StaircaseEscalante monument, you know, just happened on they lied to us the day before they created the monument. So it wasn't even with local input, it was in spite of local concern. So again, we've had a history that, you know, has been a little rocky, and we need to see if we can't reset the discussion and see if we can't be treated like other states have been treated. I think that's the point behind House Bill 148.
Now, last week, the Secretary of the Interior and the Director of the BLM both commented that this was all politics and that it wasn't substantive at all, and it was not helping matters. What would be your reaction to that statement?
Well, they made a political statement to say it's not about politics. So, I mean, the irony there is probably rich. You know, politics have been involved in this for a long time. When you have President Clinton, who lies to the congressional delegation and says, no, I'm not going to create a monument here, and then it creates the largest monument in the history of our country, and you could cut it in half and still have the two largest monuments in the history of our country. That was about politics. When you have a designation that the administration tries to circumvent and go around the Congress by creating a wildlands designation, that's about politics. A lot of this is about politics. We would like to bring some common sense to the management of the public lands that is the proverbial win-win. Good for America, good for Utah, good for the taxpayers. And when you have 70% of your landmass that's controlled by a group in Washington, D.C. that doesn't really understand it, when you have a representative for New York that says, I'm going to create a Red Rock wilderness designation here in Utah of 9.7 million acres, and when he presents it, it's never even been to Utah, that's politics. I'm with all of them. Let's get out of the politics. Let's sit down and reason together and find out what is the best interest of the management of these public lands for Utah and the people of America going forward. Clearly, accessing our natural resources, accessing our energy in responsible ways, which we can do. So they're not mutually exclusive ideas of having energy development and being good stewards of the earth. America needs us. America needs energy. We're fighting wars. We have national security issues because we're over the proverbial barrel of the Middle East, and we ought not to be. So for national security interests, for economic benefit, we ought to be developing in a more rigorous and robust way the natural resources that are on these public lands. And that's part of what 148 is about.
The detractors, and there are several, are saying very clearly that Utah is not going to be able to resist the temptation, if they gain control of these lands, of selling them all off, because that's how you're going to make the money off of it. What would you say to that?
Well, the incentive is really not there to sell them off, because under the bill that we have in place that we've passed, if we sold off any property, 95% of the proceeds go to the federal government. So there's not a lot of incentive to sell it off, because all the money is going to go back to Washington, D.C. By the way, we have exempted out in the bill all the national parks, all the 33 wilderness areas so designated. We would want to protect those pristine and beautiful areas, those vistas and venues that we all appreciate. Most everybody agrees to that. Most everybody also agrees that there's some areas that ought to be developed. And so we will find that appropriate balance. We're smart people here in Utah. There's not anything that we don't do in Utah better than they do in Washington, D.C. And so I don't expect that this would be any different. We will have, under the legislation that's been passed, a large committee of all stakeholders which would determine what should we do with these lands. It may just be heightened multiple use of the BLM over as opposed to what we have today. It may not be a significant change at all. And yet we would have mutual benefit for the state of Utah and America, and protect our farmers, our ranchers, our water rights, protect outdoor recreation, and access our natural resources in environmentally sensitive ways.
The figure being floated around is that currently the BLM is spending about $8 billion managing the public lands in the West. Can we do a better job and do it more efficiently, economically?
Absolutely. Whether it's health care, where we do a better job locally than they do on a national level, whether it's Medicaid, Medicare, we do a better job, and we would wish they would give us more flexibility. And President Obama has said he supports more flexibility. Whether it's in transportation and building roads, we do it better than the federal government does. There's not really anything we don't do better. We do more with less. We've argued back in Washington, D.C., block grant the monies to us where we have shared responsibility. I've said we'll take 20% less money if you'll take away the strings. We'll have better outcomes and save the taxpayers dollars. Same thing is true with the public lands. We can manage them well, we can do them better, it's closer to people, it's probably more responsive, and we know our backyards better than the people in Washington, D.C.
Well, let's continue that discussion when we come back from a break. We'll be back with the county seat with Governor Gary Herbert talking about House Bill 148 after this commercial break.
Ever wanted to go on a vacation to Mars? What about a visit to the Old West? Impossible, right? Well, forget what you think is real. In southern Utah's Kane County, other worlds are just an ATV ride away. The Old West lives on in every sunset. From the downtown streets of Little Hollywood to the vistas that have inspired the world. Never find yourself closer to home and yet farther than you've ever been. Southern Utah's Kane County, where anywhere is possible.
The State of Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration. SITLA manages 3.5 million acres in Utah lands with the express purpose of furthering the education of Utah students while promoting local industry, oil and gas, even residential development, all at the same time. Through the careful use of trust lands, we distributed more than $22 million to Utah schools last year. The State of Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration, building the state's permanent school fund.
Welcome to San Juan County. See forever May 20th, 2012 for the annular or Ring of Fire eclipse. Natural Bridges National Monument will be one of the best locations in Utah's canyon country to view this amazing phenomenon. Utah's San Juan County, where life is elevated.